Okay, so first off, I just want to thank Bluebridge for hosting this event. So it's really exciting, and I hope that everyone is staying safe during these kind of unprecedented times with the pandemic that everyone is experiencing. And I'm currently located in Stockholm in my basement. Unfortunately, you're unable to see that. I even have a roll up and everything here, but maybe we'll get this working. So anyways, the agenda for today is for me to talk a little bit about kind of what we're seeing from a threat landscape perspective. I'll combine that with some live demonstrations and basically go through what we're seeing in terms of especially kind of more focused on more advanced targeted types of attacks. So I'll kick off. So this is kind of the quote for my presentation, which I think is a really beautiful quote. The important thing is to never stop questioning. Now, the challenge for a lot of people, for myself included, is to know what types of questions to actually ask and also how to kind of formulate your questions. So therefore, I thought I would start my presentation with providing a little bit of a background about what we're seeing, and hopefully that will kind of also provide some more detailed information about what types of questions could be asked. So this is probably most of you are familiar with these different types of cyber attacks, and I've kind of started off my presentation with this slide here just to kind of go through what we're seeing in terms of, this is actually kind of my classification of different types of cyber attacks. So the first one, probably most of you are familiar with, which is what I would, or what would be categorized as spray and pray types of attacks. And this is something that you most likely at one point or another have seen yourself. This is where you see an email. Looks like it's coming from, for example, local post office or tax department or Apple or Netflix or something like that. And basically it's trying to get you to either click on a link in that email or open up an attachment. And most of the time we're still seeing this is quite normal, that this would then contain some sort of ransomware in some shape or form. I also have another category, which is more of the advanced automated types of attacks. So this is where we're seeing that there are a lot of scanners online that will basically search for different types of vulnerabilities and use that. I would say, for example, the WannaCry and NotPetya would kind of fall into this category of more advanced types of attacks, where it started out with infecting one endpoint and then spreading across the network. But during my session today, I will focus on the last piece, which is the advanced persistent threat. So this is more of a targeted attack against one specific organization. So this is something that enterprises have lived with for quite some time. However, lately we've also started to see this across even the smaller and medium-sized businesses. And what we're seeing is that the criminals, they will go to lengths to actually, first of all, collect as much information about one particular organization and do as much damage as possible. I'll take you through one scenario. To put some numbers on this, what we're also seeing is that this is probably as well not a surprise for most of you, but most of the breaches that we're seeing includes phishing emails. So again, going back to the old trusted email, which is still to this day one of the most commonly used methods to get into or breach an organization. And we've also seen that approximately 41% of IT professionals report at least a daily phishing attack. And you can also see some numbers there on different companies, depending on how often they see this. And The motivation for phishing attacks is about 59% financial and 41% unauthorized access. So this gives you a pretty good idea of kind of the mean, or basically why the criminals are doing this. So a lot of times it's just to plant a ransomware, get their money that way. Other cases, it's more sophisticated, where they actually want to create persistence within one organization and create as much damage as possible. So I'll go through that. And I thought that I would go through something that Lockheed Martin has called the cyber kill chain. And this is basically the 7 steps of an advanced persistent threat. So some of you might already be familiar with these 7 steps, but this is basically the steps that are often being used when infecting one organization, or basically penetrating or breaching one particular organization. So the first step, or first stage, is the reconnaissance stage. And this is where they basically harvest email addresses, collect valuable information, and so on. And the second stage is the weaponization, where they basically coupling the exploit with backdoors into delivery payloads. So there are a lot of different tools out there that the criminals use. So starting off with social networking, this is something that we're seeing quite often being used to collect as much information about one particular organization. People tend to share a little bit more than they probably should on these different types of services. So for example, if an organization is undergoing a migration to, let's say, Office 365, for example, it's quite common that they publish this type of information on LinkedIn. And this is the type of information that the criminals are often after. The second thing is that they will, of course, also do different types of port scanners against one particular organization using different types of tools. Kali Linux is a distribution of Linux that is commonly being used, has a bunch of built-in tools that can be used to harvest information about one particular organization. But there are even online scanners and things in that nature that also are being commonly used by criminals. So once they've collected as much information as possible about one particular organization, they will continue on to this third stage, which is the delivery phase. And this is where basically they've collected all the information. They've selected one particular means of using, for example, that information that they've collected, or if they've found a vulnerability against one particular organization, and deliver that weaponized bundle to the victim. And like I said in the beginning, 93% is still coming via email, sometimes via web, USB, and other means as well. The fourth stage is the exploitation. And this is basically when they're exploiting a vulnerability to execute the code on the victim's system. So, and this is going back to the old saying that you are the weakest link. And again, a lot of the times what we're seeing is that the criminals will use sophisticated social engineering to get the users to do actions that they probably shouldn't. So for example, opening up an attachment, clicking on a link within an email, and things in that nature. And then stage 5 is going to basically install the malware on the asset. And then stage 6 is establishing persistence or creating a command and control channel to the victim's computer or system. So these different steps are commonly being used for these types of more advanced persistent threats, going through kind of starting with the reconnaissance, moving up, and then eventually getting the payload delivered to the victim. So I thought that I would do a quick demo here just to kind of show you one example of how that could look like. So I have with me on my side here. So first of all, I have Windows 10. So this Windows 10 computer doesn't have any protection on it at the moment. And on this side here, I have a Kali Linux computer that I talked about before. So this is the hacker side of this particular demo. And I just wanted to kind of show you one example of how one attack like this could look like. So on the hacker side, basically what they are doing here is basically just waiting on people to click on a particular link, run a particular file that they then have socially engineered to get to the victim. So going to the Windows 10 computer, this is just one example of what it could look like, but let's say that this particular organization is currently undergoing a migration to Office 365. This type of information can then be used by the criminals to send information, basically get them to do different steps. Make sure you download this particular file when you click on this link, disregard any security warnings and run it. Now, this is a very crude example, but you get the point at least of how this could look like. What we're often seeing as well is that the criminals will take this one step further. So they will actually even give the victim a call just to make sure that they're following the steps. So basically saying, we're from IT operations, you're the last one, and we need you to migrate as quickly as possible. You need to click on this link and download it. And this has commonly being used, especially for enterprises. But again, we're starting to see the same kind of behaviors from the criminals, even for smaller and mid-sized types of organizations. So the user clicks on the link, basically takes them to Office 365. They get this file that they were requested to run and disregard any security warnings. And then going back to the Kali Linux machine, we'll see hopefully within a few seconds that we now have persistence on that machine. So we've now have a session opened towards this Windows 10 machine. So I'll just minimize everything here. And now I can start to do a lot of different things. Like most of the time, this Windows 10 computer by itself is not the target for the hackers. This Windows 10 computer by itself might not contain that much valuable information. So most of the times, the criminals want to laterally move across the network and infect as many endpoints and especially servers as they possibly can. So I'll just start to interact with this session. And then there's a bunch of different things I can do here. So let's see if I can get the webcam to take a picture of myself. So let's see. Yeah, there we go. This is me in my basement. At least that web camera works. So that's interesting. I can also do other things. So there's a bunch of different experts. I wanted to show you kind of one example here. So if I try to get system access on this computer at this point, I currently, get system. Basically what it's telling me is that the operation failed. So I wasn't able to actually get system privileges on this particular computer. But there are a bunch of different exploits that can be run. So I'll try this one. Let's see. So we will start a new session. So now I have another session on this same computer. And if I try to get system now, I now have system privileges on this computer. So like I mentioned, I probably want to now start to collect as much information as possible to allow me to laterally move across the network. And one of the first things is that I want to collect as many passwords as possible from this computer. So this is just one example of me performing a hash dump against this Windows 10 computer and basically extracting all the passwords that have been used on this Windows 10 computer. And you can see here as an example that an admin user has at one point been logged into this computer. So I can take the password hash and try to decrypt it and basically provide me with the password in plain text. And there are a bunch of different services that allow you to do that. So this is just one example called the crackstation.net. So I can take the hash and paste it in here. Even the criminals have some concerns, so they also provide you with CAPTCHA to make sure that you're not a robot. Just need to select the traffic lights. This is always quite interesting. And then when I crack the hash, I'll get the password in plain text. So again, now I have the admin account from this Windows 10 computer, and this would allow me then to laterally move across the network. So this is just, like I said, a very basic example of how an attack like this could look like. So going back to my presentation, the stage 7 is to basically accomplish the original goals, steal data, deliver ransomware, crypto miners, and different types of malwares, but especially this piece about laterally moving across the network, which we're seeing quite often. And I wanted to give you one example. I'm not sure if everyone can read this or if the text is too small, but this is one piece of ransomware called the Ragnar Locker, which is commonly, this is something that we've started to see popping up more often, this type of ransomware. So it will work just like a normal ransomware would. It would encrypt your individual files, and then it would demand a ransom for you to gain access back to your files. However, this piece of ransomware also has kind of a second twist to it. And you can see here that under the attention, they also state that we've downloaded more than 10 terabytes of data from your file servers. And if you don't contact us for payment, we will publish it or sell it to interested parties. So basically, not only making sure that your data is not accessible, but also that you need to basically pay up unless you want that particular data to be published. And we've started to see this happening for companies. You probably read in the news, there's a bunch of different companies that have been targeted for these types of attacks, where basically they infect as many endpoints as possible, and then they strike all at once to create as much damage as possible. And this has caused a lot of issues for a lot of organizations out there. And I would even kind of go as far as recommend that in terms of, I'll come back to that from a security perspective, but this is definitely a big issue that we're seeing. And also, ransomware is commonly being used to cover kind of all their tracks. So in the end, when they've collected all the information that they need, they will execute the ransomware just to make sure that kind of any tracks that they left behind are covered and can't be accessed. So this is, like I mentioned before, definitely something that is becoming more and more of an issue for a lot of organizations. And one thing that they will continuously do is a technique called live off the land, where basically they're trying to use as many tools available from within the organization as possible to evade the detection. So once they have persistence within one network or one organization, instead of using malware, which could trigger an alarm and basically raise some red flags, they will try to use as many services as possible that are built into the operating system, like extracting information about accounts and so on. We often also see that, especially for smaller and mid-sized businesses, that a lot of the times it starts out with kind of an automated compromise, then followed by a human-led farming. We often see that they go to extreme length to make sure that any backups are compromised before they execute the ransomware. And third-party vendors in the supply chain are often a means to get foothold into one organization. So that's also something to keep in mind. So there's, of course, a lot of different things to think about in each individual step, and how you can kind of protect yourself from stage 1 up to stage 7. I'll be in the virtual room afterwards, so if anyone's interested, we can have a closer discussion about some of the recommendations, what you can do to prevent attacks like this. And there's also this concept of defense in depth that I really like. And this is basically, imagine the worst type of scenario. So imagine that you've been breached. What type of information would you be able to, or the criminals be able to actually collect from, for example, one infected endpoint? So thinking of kind of the worst outcome possible, where you have a breach, how could they, for example, laterally move across that network? What type of information could be collected from one particular endpoint, and so on? So it's a concept that, again, I'll be in the virtual room afterwards. We can have a closer discussion about. So going back to that initial question, or basically the theme for my presentation, the important thing is to never stop questioning. With Sophos, we provide you with the EDR solution that we provide, basically a set of tools where you can create your own questions and customize them fully within our tool. So I thought I would quickly show you a demonstration of what that actually looks like. So in terms of the Sophos portfolio, the products that I will be focusing on is the endpoint protection and the server protection. So moving into my demo environment. So this is Sophos Central. This is where you can manage all of your endpoints, servers, mobile devices, and so on. And within Sophos Central, you have the Threat Analysis Center. So this is where we'll collect anything that has occurred within one organization. So for example, if there's been an incident, we'll create a threat case for you, so you can go in and have a closer look at that. We'll also provide you with live discovery, so you can do all these different questions. You can do searches, and of course, also we have the threat indicator. So if we found something that looks a little bit suspicious, we'll present that for you as well. But if I go into the live discovery piece, so this is where you can create your own queries, and I've selected to run my queries against one server. You can see that here. We provide you with a bunch of predefined queries. So if you go into all queries, you can see that there's a bunch of different queries that you can just choose from. You can also select which operating system you want to filter on. So I'll just select on Windows servers, as this is a server. And for example, I can select some, here we go. So unsigned applications that were run. So I can select one specific query. You can see that this is a SQL script, and you can fully customize your script before running it. And then when you run it, it'll take a few seconds, and then you'll get an answer back, basically on any processes that have been run on this server that are unsigned. So here's a few examples. So a pre-release of our VPN client that has been detected. So you'll get that information in real time, and I only ran this query against one server in this case, but of course I can run this against multiple devices at the same time. So you can run this against your entire organizations all at once. And the good thing is that we're not only stopping with doing live queries or live discovery, we're also providing you with live response, so you can get a command prompt onto an endpoint as well if you want to perform some actions. For example, kill a specific process, or if you'd like to make any changes, you can do that directly from the live response piece. And also on the threat cases, of course, if there's anything, if there's an incident, let's say a ransomware was executed, you can also find more detailed information about what actually occurred, how did this ransomware came into our organization. So presenting you with a step-by-step guide of what actually occurred during this specific incident. So here we can see that Outlook downloaded this who update docx file that was launched by Winward, and then it executed the ransomware.exe through a macro. So all this information can be found here, but this will present you with information about this case itself. So if you want to, you might want to know more information about what other services were running on this endpoint. You can always go and create a forensic snapshot to get a all the information about what was actually running on that particular machine at the time of the incident. So that was just a kind of a quick overview of what you're able to do with Sophos EDR 3.0, and also kind of what we're seeing in terms of the threat landscape, different types of attacks. Like I said, I will be in the live room afterwards, so if you have any more specific questions, please feel free to join us there. But yeah, I think that summarizes it from my presentation.